Looking at the major operating differences between Road to Indy and the Europe-based F1 ladder, what can each system learn from the other to improve racing and make sure that talented drivers get the chance to race at all levels? And that's a really good question, Jeroen.
Yeah, well, I think I mentioned it before. Scholarships is my number one. I think there must be some money to be found somewhere in the FIA to make sure that the F3 champion can move up, that the F2 champion can move up. The situation we now have with sort of, Formula One Schalke with Oscar Piastri. He wins every single championship and now he's on the sidelines. I think that's very, very strange. So I think somehow that is something that needs to be sorted.
Yeah, I think you guys have kind of put it out there exactly how it is. I think with Oscar Piastri, the way he's won both F3 and then went on to win F2, and now, like you said, he's stuck on the sidelines. Is extremely unfortunate, and that's not something that happens in the Road to Indy. I think F3 and F2 might have a little bit of a better structure, and they showcase their drivers a little bit more. Obviously, a lot of their drivers get a lot more following on social media, but at the end of the day, they need to be driving a race car, and that's what the Road to Indy does. They get the scholarships in place. Now, I know there's a handful of drivers, right, that have gone through the program. Made it, for instance, like Lando Norris. He's came up through the ladder system. Now he's with McLaren. Now he's making a living off of F1, but he actually had to spend a lot of money to get there. In the Road to Indy, I didn't have any money to spend. I had to do it based off of all the scholarships. And that's the way it worked out for me, which was super important.
I think one of the big things about the Road to Indy, and you have to give a shout out to Dan Anderson, because this is essentially funded by Dan. Back in the day when Mazda was a sponsor, they had a lot of input into the scholarship itself. With Mazda not being there, it really falls back onto Dan Anderson and his finance and how he wants to keep this program rolling. And it's always kind of a balance, right? You look at F2 and F3, and I love the stability they have with their series, where the teams have to have a certain amount of cars on track. And I think that's something that I would love to look at there for us, but it's just a different approach. But I think, we spend a lot of money on scholarships. They spend a lot of money on staffing. You have to remember that, and the F2 has its own staff, F3 has its staff, F4 has its staff, whereas the Road to Indy, we all do everything. I announce everything. I announce USF 2000 Indy Pro, and when we had it, I was helping with Indy Lights. Our PR staff does all three. So I think our budget, if you split it with the three series, is a lot less to do what we do. We put that money then into the scholarships, and that's probably the big difference. And again, in the end, a guy like Kyle, like Oliver Askew, like some of these drivers who may not have had a shot at it, like a Piastri, they're going to get at least a trial, right? An audition. Because the scholarship will give you 3 or 4 races. At least you're going to get an audition. And what we're seeing now, which is great, and I think everybody's saying, hey, when you get a Herta coming through and a VK and some of these great guys coming through, like a Pato Award, no one was going to sleep on Kyle Kirkwood. You knew he was going to get a ride somewhere. It didn't feel there's a way he could have been somewhere else, but there's no way that Larry Foyt was going to let him get away, because obviously, as we said, Kyle could be a star of the future.